So we are back for our second live, and today we're going to talk about the big, beautiful bill. But specifically, we are going to talk about the no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. So just the items that relate to payroll. So if you're joining us, please don't ask me about anything else in the bill because I couldn't tell you. But as far as the no tax and no on tips and no tax on overtime go, people have a lot of questions, both employers and employees. Now, it's important to remember that this was just signed into law. So even though it is active for the current year, we are still waiting on some things. So, for example, by October, we are supposed to get a list of the types of businesses that they would deem tipped type of work. So they're going to actually release a list. And then also for the current year, we're still waiting on some more specific instructions on what we need to provide to the employee or how we need to provide the information to show that breakout of the overtime amounts and the tip amounts so that they can claim it when they go to file their taxes. So if you're just joining us, sorry, I jumped right in, talking about the big, beautiful bill, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. And again, we are just still kind of in a holding pattern, awaiting further instruction. So these provisions are in effect for the current tax year, 2025. And unless something changes, will only be in effect through 2028. So this is a short-term plan for now. Of course, that could change. And then one thing that I just want to throw out there right now is that there's another thing kind of hidden that relates to payroll, not hidden, but the threshold for issuing 1099s is going to increase from $600 to $2,000, but that will not take effect until next year. So that will just be for a shorter period of time. But again, right now, if you pay an independent contractor $600 or more, you do have to issue them a 1099. But starting next year for the 2026 tax year, so not next January for this year, but starting in the 2026 tax year, if you pay an independent contractor, you are not required to give them a 1099 unless you pay them $2,000 or more. So for small business owners, that will mean fewer 1099s to issue. Of course, I am thinking through this as far as, what does that look like for small business owners and, if they're audited or keeping track of things. But anyways, that is in there as well. So let's dig in here. So we'll start with the no tax on tips. Even though they're calling this no tax, what they really mean is no federal income tax. So all other taxes still apply. So Social Security, Medicare, state withholding, but federal income tax specifically is what we're talking about when we say no tax on tips or overtime. And the way that this is going to work is that an individual who is in a tipped profession, and again, we are waiting for that list, which should be out by October, but they've already put some examples out there like food service, beauty services, so barbers, haircut people, nail techs, those types of professions. We can expect those to be on the list. We just don't have the all-inclusive list yet. But individuals who are in a tip profession can claim up to $25,000 in qualified tips when they file their income tax return. So right now for this year, of course, payroll systems have been including those tip amounts and taxing tipped employees based on income that includes those tips. So when an employee files their income tax return, they can then claim those tips which will reduce their overall taxable income. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they will or will not get a refund, because remember, payroll is only a small piece of a person's income tax return. There's a lot of other things that go in there. But, assuming that they were taxed on their tips and now they're going to claim their tips, likely they will get a refund because they have overpaid. Now, this is if you make $150,000 or more as a single filer, or $300,000 or more as a joint filer, the amount that you can claim phases out by $100 for every $1,000 over the limit. So if you are exceeding the $150,000 threshold as a single filer, or exceeding the $300,000 threshold as a married filer, the amount of tips that you can claim will go down from $25,000. Each $1,000 you make over the threshold will bump that amount you can claim down by $100. So this year, we're not changing anything in the payroll systems. Employees will still continue to be taxed on their tips for now. Likely, this isn't going to be a huge disruption for employees that have tips, because we're already halfway through the year. They're used to having that tax taken out anyway. We should not anticipate any changes being required in payroll systems or withholding tables or anything like that for 2025. But for 2026, we definitely expect to see some changes. Not only will the payroll system not calculate federal income tax on tips, but they will also have to have different reporting requirements, probably on the 941, as well as the employee's W-2, to break out these amounts, so that when they go to file their taxes, they don't need anything additional. It's already on their forms. For 2025, we're still waiting for more specific instructions on what employers should be providing to employees so that they can go ahead and claim these tips. But as of right now, just as a reasonable method. So again, in the next few months, we should expect to see more details on that, so that we can make a plan for W-2s, which are coming up pretty soon. What else? Oh, when it comes to tips too, I think it's important that we talk about which tips qualify. So qualified tips are only those that are voluntary, and the person giving their tip gets to decide how much they are tipping. So I don't know how that will trickle down. I know sometimes in a restaurant, for example, if you have a larger party, they'll automatically add an 18 or 20% gratuity. Well, according to these rules, because the tipper is not deciding on that amount and it's not voluntary, that wouldn't qualify as a qualified tip based on the explanation that they have provided. So, that I think could be a little bit dicey, where you have both happening with the same person, where, sometimes they're getting tips from people, and then for big parties, they might need to have a different tip code for that mandated gratuity on those big parties. And then they also have a requirement in here that you have to have a social security number in order to claim the tips. So if you don't have a social security number, you cannot claim the tips. And then also, if you are a married couple, you do have to file a joint return to claim the tips. This is a lot of people are asking, do you have to itemize to be able to claim these? And the answer is no, you do not have to itemize. So it's a above the line, I think is what they call it, where you can still make these deductions on your income tax return, even if you're using the standard deduction when you file your taxes. I think that about covers it for the no tax on tips. And then um, with the no tax on overtime. So again, we are talking about no federal income tax on overtime, not no tax at all. Very important distinction. Some people are upset about that, saying that's not what was promised, but that is what it is. So we're again talking about no federal income tax on overtime. And just like the tips, there are maximums that someone can claim. So for a single filer, $12,500 in overtime is the maximum. For married filers, it is 25,000. And just like the tip stipulations, that decreases if you make more than 150,000 as a single filer or more than 300,000 as a joint filer. And again, if you are married and you want to claim this, you do have to sorry, I have to open my chat. So I don't know what she's talking about. If you're married, you do have to file a joint return in order to claim the overtime, just like you do with tips. And also, you do have to have a social security number as well, just like the tip. Now, when we're talking about overtime, we're talking about the overtime premium. And so let's see. Oh, we have some comments. So sorry, guys, I'm still new here. So we have some questions that came in, so I'll pause and take these real quick. How do bonuses affect hourly? Are they taxed different on payroll? So I can talk about that another time. That's not today. We're just talking about tips, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. And then, so we had a question, when does this go live? So it is live now, right now for the 2025 tax year. But again, this is not going to change payroll systems. This is just going to change what an employee can claim when they go to file their income tax return. And again, next year, we do anticipate changes to payroll systems, including the reporting forms like the W-2 and the 941, but still awaiting more specific instructions on what they want that reporting to look like. So, we'll keep everyone posted as we learn more. Still waiting on the list of professions as well for tipped professions, which should be coming out in October. So as usual, it'll be at the 11th hour and magically all the payroll people will get it done on time and make things happen because that's what we do, right? And then let's see, we had another question. Would you suggest still 1099ing at the lower rate and not waiting until they hit the threshold of 2,000? So whenever you have an independent contractor, I think it's really important that you get the W-9 before you give them their first check. So the W-9 for a contractor is similar to a W-4 for a W-2 employee. So the W-9 will have the contractor's name, business name if they have one, and then their EIN or social, what type of business they are. And if you get that on file, then you don't have to worry about the threshold as you start to pay them, because now you have their information. And if you end up paying them, above the $2,000 threshold, you can easily go and do that 1099 for them. I think where a lot of small business owners kind of slip up a little bit is not getting that W-9 as if it was, if you're thinking about a W-2 employee, that's your new hire paperwork. So for an independent contractor, you want to get that W-9 as their new hire paperwork, which I hate using that term because employees are not contractors and there's no such thing as a 1099 employee and so on. But if we think of it in those terms, you want to get that W-9 first, and now you can work, look at your books, and at the end of the year, whoever is above the threshold, grab their W-9, get them their 1099. Whoever doesn't meet the threshold, you don't have to worry about it. But so that's my 2 cents on that. I think that takes care of all of that. So talking about overtime, again, for the overtime, just like the tips, you have to have a social security number to claim it. But I think one thing that people are not quite grasping with the overtime is that we're talking about the additional 0.5 times that someone makes when they work overtime. So if someone works more than 40 hours in a work week at the federal level, there are a few states with different rules, they get paid 1.5 times their regular rate of pay for the hours over 40. They would have been paid that 1x times regardless. So we're just talking about that additional 0.5 times pay, the overtime premium that they're receiving. So that is what they can claim, not if you're looking at your pay stub and you have, certain number of hours of regular, certain number of hours at overtime. We're not talking about that full overtime total unless your employer already has it broken out regular, where all hours are paid at regular, and then overtime premium, where it's just the additional 0.5 times. That may not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but just think of it as the additional amount that you're getting for it being overtime, not the full amount that you're paid for the time that you work during overtime. And so with the overtime claiming, again, we're still waiting for more information on what specifically we need to provide to employees. In the bill right now, it just says a reasonable method, but we anticipate that they will release more information on what they deem to be reasonable. What does that need to look like? What information does it need to contain? So it's probably going to be a bit of a mess this year, more so for income tax preparers than payroll people. I think payroll people and business owners just need to understand that at the end of the day, this is something that the employee can claim when they file their income tax return. It's not going to affect payroll systems this year. Starting next year, necessary updates will be made so that employees are taxed correctly, so that the overtime premiums broken out and tips are broken out, so that employers don't have to provide additional informational sheets to employees so that they can claim these credits. But for this year, we're basically all just going to do the best that we can. If we're getting information in a couple of months about what this needs to look like, that can be a pretty heavy lift at the final moment to get that out the door for your employees. So we don't have any information that I know of right now of when that needs to be provided. Will that coincide with the W-2 deadline? Will we have extra time because this is brand new? We don't know those items yet. So as always, super fun, still waiting for more details. Everyone's kind of panicking, but again, this is not as much of a disruption as people are thinking about it being, unless you are in charge of programming payroll software for somebody. And then you probably have your work cut out for you for, getting these changes implemented for, to go live in just a few months, really, if we're talking about 2026, but without all of the details to really start programming yet. So tax on tips, no tax on overtime. We are specifically talking about no federal income tax on tips or overtime, not necessarily no tax at all. For both of these are above the line items on your tax return, meaning you do not have to itemize to be able to claim them, but you do have to have a social security number in order to claim them. And if you're married, you do have to do a filing joint return in order to claim them. Still waiting on the list of businesses that the IRS will consider tipped and how we are going to report that information, because from what we see now, we're going to have to report not only the tip amount, but also the type of profession that it is, so that they can validate on their end if it's a qualified tip or not tip profession. And next year we're going to see changes in the payroll system again. So hopefully that is helpful. Of course, if you are a business owner and you have employees with questions, feel free to reach out. Trying to get information out there because this is new. It's going into effect immediately. It's fast. And at the end of the day, it's going to be beneficial for those who are earning overtime or tips and now can claim those, reduce their taxable wage, pay less in federal income tax. And then for the employers, the one little bonus that's in there is less 1099s to issue, with that increase in the threshold. But again, remember that the no tax on tips, no tax on overtime is now, but the 1099 threshold does not start until next year. So in January of 2026, when you go to do your 1099s, you're still going to be looking at the $600 threshold for payments made to contractors in 2025. I think that about covers it without me repeating myself over and over. And I don't see any more questions right now. So we will go ahead and wrap this up. But if you have follow-up questions or if you're watching this on a replay, you can always find us online at valorpayrollsolutions.com. Love to help you out if you have questions. And I will leave it at that. So thank you to everyone that joined today. Hopefully you found this helpful, and we'll see you next month.